Now let's take a look at a few examples working with triggers, and this is going to be a two-part video. Here in the first part, I just want to go through the steps of creating an insert trigger and build a little test bed, if you will, to see how it's running. And this will help you understand and feel real comfortable with how triggers are working. Then you can take this example and build on it and make triggers do whatever you need them to do. So the first thing that I want to do here is we're going to create us a little table, very simple little table that we're going to use. We're going to call this TrigX. It's going to be the name of our table. And we're just going to put a couple of columns in here to insert into. And the first one we'll do last name, and we'll do varchar 50 on that one. And then we'll do, of course, first name. And we'll do varchar 50 on that one as well. And so that would be our table. So I'll just highlight that. We'll execute it, and there is our table out there now called TrigX. Control R to make my results go away. And now let's create a trigger on this table. So I'm going to type create trigger, and I'm going to call the trigger notify. And then notice I'm going to come down and say on, and I got to give the name of the table. TrigX is the name of our table. And here, this is going to be an insert trigger. Now I could put a comma and put update, comma, delete, or I could just do for delete or just for update, but this is just going to be an insert trigger, so it'll only fire when inserts happen. And after as is the code that I want to have run when a trigger occurs. First thing I'm going to do is call the print statement and put a little attention here. Then on another line, do another print statement. And I'm just going to put a little informational. A row was inserted into the TrigX table. All right. Now that's going to appear on that messages tab. When we run a query, it's going to appear out there on the messages tab, and it won't be in a result set. So now let's think about what we can do in a result set. And so what I'm going to do is, and I'll put it in caps so you can tell a difference here. I'm going to select, and I'm going to put a literal in a column, and I'm going to say the inserted data was, put a colon and a space and close that. And then I am going to say, I'll select everything from inserted. Okay. Now, notice this right here is a column. I'll have to put a comma there. And then they'll get the rest of the columns. And then this will pull it from the inserted table. We've already talked about that. So don't let this confuse you. This right here is a column. Then there's a comma, and then we'll get all the rest of the columns from inserted, okay? And let me put my space back in there. Now let's go to the next line, and let's do one more select. And let's select everything from TrigX. Now the trigger's going to do all this, okay? So when an insert happens, we are going to print a couple of rows out on the message tab. Then we're going to do a select, and it's going to say the inserted data was. Then we're going to return the rows from inserted. This is what was passed in. Then we're going to select from TrigX to see what actually happened to it. I'll highlight all of that, execute it. My trigger was completed successfully, so I'll Control R to make that go away. Now let's do an insert. So I'm going to insert into TrigX, and I've got to tell it my values. We've got to go last name first. So James Jack, close that, and I'm going to put multiple lines in here so we can really see this happen. Another last name, James Frank, and then let's do one more just so that we'll have plenty to work with, and then we'll have Long Mark. That's a pretty good name. So what I'm going to do now is run my insert, and you'll notice the insert happened and the trigger fired, and it gave us this result set. Then inserted data was Long Mark. Then inserted data was James Frank. Then inserted data was James Jack. Notice it returned them back out of inserted in the opposite order that we put them in. Then it put them in the table in that different order, actually in the order that we inserted them. But notice this is out of the inserted table that was created when the trigger fired. And then this is the result set that was sent back from inside the trigger. So quick review here. So notice our trigger here, anytime someone does an insert on the TrigX table, the notify trigger fires It's going to print a couple of rows on the Messages tab. I need to go back and show you that. Then it's going to do a couple of select statements. Okay? And so I'll do it again. I don't have any kind of primary key, so it'll just keep adding people. So notice there's all the people. We now have twice as many as we had. But notice on the Messages tab, attention, a row was inserted into the TrigX table. So we'll stop part 1 right here. This was a simple insert trigger, and we'll play more with the inserted and deleted tables in part 2 of trigger examples.